Building product. How do I know which feature to build next? This is the wrong question to ask if you want to build winning products. Îmi pare rău să vă dezamăgesc, but I phrased the title of this session on purpose because I think that many of us, they fall into this trap, but this is literally the wrong question to ask if you want to build winning products. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'll start with a story. Back in the days, in the early 2000s, in the States, there was this bank that was sued for fraud. It was a huge scandal and a huge deal, and it became a huge deal in the States and the press because the bankers, they started to open accounts for customers without their prior approval. Why were they doing that? This bank was very well known for their cross-selling strategy. That is, when a customer would come to a bank, they would open an account, but then the bankers, they would be like, okay, well, do you want to open a savings account? Do you want to get a mortgage? Can you get more? Because that was the core of their business. They wanted to cross-sell. And so the leadership said, well, we want to increase the amount of accounts per customer. That was their objective. And they set up very high goals that were also paired with very lucrative incentives. As a result, the bankers, they were under pressure, and many of them, they started to cheat the systems. And this is how the fraud happened. Now, this is a story of many things gone wrong. And this is also a story of an objective gone wrong. What do I mean by that? And here I need to move to click to the next slide. You have the objective, așa vedeți toți, ca să vedeți slide-urile, increase the number of accounts per customer. You'd look at it and you'd think, well, nothing's wrong about it. But what they did is that they missed the customer perspective in this objective. And now look at this objective, increase the number of accounts per customer, and compare it with create customers who want to open more accounts. Can you see the difference a little bit? Increase the number of accounts and create customers who want to open more accounts. This objective by default requires different initiatives to be implemented. And this is what I want to talk to you about today. And going back to the initial title of this session, it's not about what feature do I want to build next. It's about what customer need do I want to prioritize. And I know you're going to tell me, oh my God, Irina, I came here at 6:30 on a Thursday for you to tell me that all this bullshit about customers, that the customer is first and the customer is God. But there is a reason why I framed this workshop this way, and there is a reason why I actually wanted to talk to you about this. Because this is so simple when everyone talks about pay attention at the customer needs, yet so many of us, they fail at it. And why is that? Because product strategy doesn't happen in the solution space. It's not about what feature do I build next. Product strategy happens in the customer needs space. And this is why today I want to present you a framework put forward by this lady, Teresa Torres, about how to look at your customer needs. Now, disclaimer, I know that today I'm going to talk a lot about customer needs, and this is a very important perspective to take. However, when you want to build a product and you want to evolve your product to the next step, there are many other things to take into account. And building winning products is almost like this art of balancing on one side customer delight and on the other side business ambition, right? You have customer needs, but you also have business constraints. And so the disclaimer is that actually if you do want to build a winning product, there are many things to take into account, and this can be the whole subject of a whole master class. For today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this bit here, which is problem framing and customer discovery. And the framework that I want to present to you today is this one. I'm curious if any of you have seen or have heard about this. This is called an opportunity solution tree. Nice. How did you come across it? Teresa Torres. Nice. How did you like it? Did you start implementing it, or some of the advice? Cool. Nice. I think it's going to be a really nice exercise because we're going to have some exercises afterwards in the groups, and then we can see. So this is the framework, and essentially, what is this? She suggests a framework to map your customer needs. So here we're talking about needs, and this framework does two things. So one is, how do I map the many customer needs that I have? And second, which need do I pursue next? Now, you've noticed that I've been talking a lot about customer needs, and on the slides you have the word opportunity. I am using those two terms almost interchangeably because, okay, I need to move here, right? Because I'm talking about customer needs, what Teresa means here is that we don't only have customer needs, but we also have customer pain points and desires. And therefore, she encompasses in the word opportunity, customer needs, pain points, and desires. But in the future, when you will see this word opportunity, you'll know that I mean customer needs, and I might use them interchangeably. And as an example of that can be, I can say, for instance, if I'm watching Netflix, I don't know if this show is good for me. That is a customer need that I have. And this can also be seen as an opportunity, as an example. Now, two important things to highlight about this tree. Extremely important for us to capture needs and not solutions. Remember what I said at the very beginning? Product strategy happens in the problem space, not in the solution space. And so, for instance, if you are talking to a customer and the customer says, well, and here we're talking within the context of Netflix, the customer says, well, I just want to say the name of the movie I'm searching for. Now, this is a feature request. It's not a need. They're telling you that you want voice search to search for a movie. If you're in this situation, try to ask, well, what would that feature do for you? And they might say, well, I actually don't want to type a long movie title. And that is the underlying need. I don't want to type a long movie title that you should capture in your whole map of customer needs. Why is this extremely important? Because the problem space opens more of the solution space. And if I follow this example, I don't want to type a long movie title, which is my need. I have two solutions. Either I implement voice search, or I implement an autocomplete session. And of course, the autocomplete part is much easier to implement, and then in that sense, then you have more time and more resources to focus on a different feature. Another important fact to keep in mind when we talk about this framework is that this framework essentially depicts two relationships. So you have a parent-child relationship. So if you look at these opportunities, and bear with me, I'm going to go also with some examples. This is considered a child, and this is considered a parent. And all of this, they are the free child of this opportunity. And so this is one type of relationships where basically the child represents nothing else than a subset of an opportunity. And you also have siblings relationships, where siblings, they're similar in a way that they are subsets of the same opportunity, but they are different in a sense that they require different solutions if they are to be tackled. Bear with me, we're going to go straight away now into an example. Now, I wanted to give you an example from my personal experience, and I will have to explain you what I'm doing before I share with you an example of what I've done as a product manager at PlanA. So PlanA, and I'm going to take you a little bit in the green tech space right now. PlanA is a company and a tool that helps companies to decarbonize. What does that mean? If I am a company, that means that I'm having an office space, that I use a certain amount of electricity, heating, that I have employees who are coming at work. And in the European Union, there are a lot of rules and laws that basically impose companies of a certain size and revenue to disclose their emissions, so the CO2 equivalent, as well as when they disclose, for instance, their financials. So it's not something they can avoid at this point in time. And if in the past, some companies, they were doing it because they wanted to through consulting, right now you have a lot of tools, like one of our companies, who are allowing customers or companies to do this very easily. And what they do is that they come into this tool, they add their data, and then they can see, let's say, I'm going to say I have this amount of electricity, this amount of energy, that many of my employees used a car, and so on and so forth. And then the tool calculates for them the amount of emissions. The tool also helps you afterwards to think of scenarios you can take in order to decarbonize. So I know I have a certain amount of emissions. What can I do to decarbonize? When I joined PlanA a year and a half ago, I was responsible for one part of the product, which was about collecting and updating the data. That is, our clients, they would come and they have to add their data. For instance, I need to find the data from my bills about my electricity. I need to find somewhere my fuel consumption, and so on and so forth. And that was the user journey I was responsible for. And what I did back in the days, this is a snapshot of the opportunity solution tree that I put in place. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to explain you a little bit the logic that I followed. And I'm going to ask you to be here focused on this one, because afterwards I'm going to ask you to do an exercise. So what I did is that at the top, I started with an outcome. What was my product outcome that I wanted to reach? And for me, if you think about it, the clients, they come into the tool and they add their data. The goal was to decrease the time to upload the data, because I don't want the clients to spend days and weeks to be stuck in adding their data, because in essence, the value of the product is that you want to see your emissions and you want to decarbonize. And so therefore, my objective is that I want to decrease the time to add data to the platform. Afterwards, I started to think about, okay, the more I talked to the customers, the more I started to figure out what are the specific steps that they take when they come into the product. And I identified 3 of them. One is, I want to understand the materiality of my emissions. I know that's very specific. That's about understanding which category do I look into first. So do I first measure my electricity, or do I first measure my consumptions? So before I even add my data, I want to understand where do I focus. Then I want to understand which calculation method I use. And as an example, for instance, if I am to calculate my emissions for, let's say, transportation, the tool can offer you several options. So you can use your fuel consumption data, or you can use your distance data, or if you have maybe information about the amount of money spent, that's also good information, because based on that, we can still calculate the emissions. The question that users had is that you show me 5 types of calculation methods. how do I know which one to use? And that's a big question for them in there. And only afterwards they go back and then they start adding their data. Now, that's a snapshot of a tree that I put together a year and a half ago. But this is the final result. The way I did it is that you go through many customer interviews back and forth. And for instance, I started to literally, through customer interviews, I started to gather customer needs. And for instance, one of them was, well, it takes me ages to manually add data to the platform. That is, we had literally, if you imagine a platform at the very beginning, a box where they had to type in 200 kilometers for the month of January 2020. Click next. 300 kilometers. I have a question from Sergio. No?
I just wanted to say that the more time you spend on your computer, the higher is your carbon print as well. So it's also bad.
That's a really funny one, because I'm going to show you we have now, when we have errors in the system, that's what we show them as a validation error. That's a good one. I was saying that the clients, they were saying it takes me a lot of time to manually add data to the platform. You have a second one, I'm going to go to the third one, which says I get a lot of errors when uploading files. What do I want to say here is that the more you run customer interviews, the more you understand what are their needs. Not the feature request, but what are their pain points and needs. And then you start thinking, wait a bit, there is some similarities in between them. And this is the example that I can show you here. So if you see the first and the third one, they're kind of similar, because they talk about, I have pain points when I'm adding my data to the platform. And that's how I went back and forth, and that's how I built the tree, right? And here you can see that in the end, I decided that these two parts, they're going to be siblings, but they're going to have this parent opportunity, because in the end I want to add data quickly, but this can be broken down into many other more customer needs. Now, this is a very simplified version. Right now it looks completely different, it's much bigger. And what I wanted to tell you is that this is not a one-time exercise to do. This is a continuous exercise to do with your team all the time, and it changes a lot. You can also see it's very subjective, because when we talk about customer needs, it's an infinite space of needs. But you go a lot back and forth. You have one more interview here, one more interview there, and then you think, okay, how could I structure my needs? In the end, what is important to note is that we really need to schedule time in our calendars to understand our customers. And this shouldn't happen, when you have pressure to deliver a pitch to the investors, or you have pressure from the management team, and so on and so forth. You should make it a continuous habit, because this problem space that I was talking to you about is continuously evolving, and you can stay on top of the game and deliver the products that your customer wants only if you take time to listen to them, and only if you make it a habit. Now, time to practice.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
In case if you have a customer that has his needs, but the solution that you're building is not only for the customer, but also for his maybe customers, right?
That's for example, B2B or B2B2C?
For example, we're building something for the restaurants, right? But the restaurants are not the only ones who will be using it, it's also the guests of the restaurant.
Yeah.
Shall we do such a tree separately for the guests and separately for the customer?
Yes.
We just care about the customer because he's paying. Guests are paying.
This is a very typical example when we talk, and I talk to many of you throughout the week, when you have a marketplace example, where you have the supply and the demand, you have the suppliers, and then you have the users who come to your website. You gotta have two flows, because at the point in time, the more you develop, those are different customers with different needs. You wanna make sure you listen to all of them, so you're gonna have different solution trees for all of them. Yeah? Okay. Now, what I would like to ask you is to do a small exercise. I promise it's not too big, but I hope it's going to help you. So I'll ask you to turn your chairs and form groups of 6 like that, how you are in this position. And we're going to do a small exercise. So you just turn, so if the first row turns to the second one, and so on and so forth. Nice. Surprise, the first exercise, as the etiquette for every kind of workshop requires, the first exercise is to get to know each other better. So I'm gonna time 5 minutes for the group to discuss, for each and every person, what is your real life superpower? What is your hidden talent? So just take 5 minutes in your group and each and every one share with you what is your real life superpower. Because you're going to use that afterwards during the networking events. So you're going to have already something to talk about. All right. I'm going to set the timer. And you can go ahead. Go! Now we're going into a different kind of exercise. Now that you know each other a little bit better, now we're doing the real stuff. And the real stuff is this one. So I have prepared for you some homework from home, or not homework, homework for here, where we're gonna try to build a small branch of an opportunity solution tree together. So I'm gonna share here exercise that you will need to do in groups now that you know each other a little bit better. And I will also explain you what you need to do. And no worries about the exercise. There's nothing crazy here, and we're going to work together. It's just a practice for us to better understand how to do it. Yeah, it's the same for everyone. So what do we need to do here? Imagine, so we are working on the example of Netflix. So I think everyone here is familiar with Netflix. Imagine that you are in the, someone said, what was it? Imagine you are in the product management team of Netflix and you've gathered this customer needs. They're all there. And you're discussing with the team and thinking, how can I structure them? Is there a way for me to structure them in the way that I suggested you before to build that tree? Yeah? And here I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 6 opportunities. You don't have to map all of them. The idea really is here to see if you can think and if you can see some similarities between them. Can you see any parent-child relationship, or can you see any siblings relationships? Yeah? And again, you don't have to map all of them, because maybe some of them, they're just by themselves. You don't have a lot of information yet. And I'm going to give you a hint. The outcome should be a bit like this, right? So out of all those 6, try to find if you can find this kind of branch in between the needs that you have. I'm going to give you here some markers, and I'm going to spend some time with each and every group to see how do you approach the exercise, and then we'll see what we get. Awesome. Well, I'm excited that you're into the exercise still, but I'd say let's turn to the screen and then let's see what are the results. So, what I wanted to say first is that this is just an example, right? And as I said before, when we talk about the problem space and the customer needs, it's a very subjective space, and it's an exercise that continues all the time, and it's an exercise you have to do it with the team all the time. So that's an example. Some of you might have a different opinions, but if you look at the needs that you have right now, if you take the first 2, I can't find anything to watch, and then I'm out of episodes of my favorite shows. I've seen many of you already doing that. You kind of see that the second one, I'm out of episodes of my favorite show, it's kind of a subset of I can't find anything to watch, right? And so a way to do it is to say, okay, maybe I can't find anything to watch as my parent out there, sau tata, cum a spus Sergiu, așa. Another opportunity can be, I can't figure out how to search for a specific show, right? Because if you think about it, I can't figure out how to search for a show. It's also a subset of I can't find anything to watch. And the third one can also be, the show I was watching is no longer available. Because if the show is no longer available, that's also a subset of I can't find anything to watch, right? And so the exercise that you've done right now, it's an example of building a small branch out of, let's say, having all your customer needs. And that is the kind of exercise I would like to advise and I would urge you to do when you go with your teams, to really try to have the list of the customer needs and try to map them and think, okay, what opportunity is where and what goes under what opportunity. The more you start talking to the customers and the more you start thinking about where do I take my product next, when you have this kind of overview, it's extremely helpful. Now, we're going to have a second task, but this one is going to be something that we're going to do together. And I'm going to ask you also to participate and help me. Don't be afraid, there is no failure whatsoever. It's an exercise we want to do together so that I can show you also how does an opportunity solution tree look like in the end. And so, if you recall the example that I gave you with PlanA, what I did also for my company, when you start doing it, let's say, in this case for Netflix, the way we would start thinking about it is before I start thinking where is this customer need going and this customer need going, I'm trying to imagine what is the user journey? How is the user going from the beginning until the end, and what are the steps they are taking? Through interviews and through understanding the customers, it naturally becomes clear what are the main steps. You don't have to go through like very sophisticated things. You just think what are the main steps that the customer is going through. And in this example, if we think about Netflix, super simple. I am deciding to watch something at first, then I'm choosing something to watch, then I'm watching, and then it's finished. I'm transforming these steps into user needs. So first, if I think again from the beginning until the end in my user journey, I need something to do. Second is, I'm not sure what to watch. I'm watching a show, and my show ended. And now, let's assume that on top, these are the opportunities that we've listed according to the journey of the user when they are watching a show on Netflix. And all the circles that you see below, they are basically opportunities that relate to a certain step in the journey, right? So I want to watch my shows on my flight, and I want to watch my shows on my train commute. Those are two opportunities that relate to the first need. I need to do something, and so on and so forth. And I would like to suggest you now to work together to see how we can structure some of them. Now, these needs, I put them here as an examples, but ideally, you would take them from your customer interviews when you talk to them, and then you understand what are their pain points. Because the more you talk to customers, the more you would identify the same needs all over again. Some of them not, but many of them, they're overlapping. And so I would suggest, let's start with the first step. So we have the main need, I need something to do, and here we have two opportunities. I want to watch my shows on my flight, and I want to watch my shows on my train commute. Who wants to give it a try? How, if we look only at these two, how would you structure them?
What do you mean by structure? Under which parent it goes?
Yeah, do you see any siblings relationships? Do you see any parent relationships? Mm-hmm. So how would you, let's say you would need to build a branch, how would you do it?
For example, I'm going for a trip or travel, and in the meantime, while I'm traveling, I want to do something. And it might be on a flight, it might be on a train, it might be in a car, in a taxi. It's classified by the location of where I'm sitting now.
For for example, they're already kind of structured because saying that we have the opportunity that I need to do something, and then we have the child that I want to watch my shows on my flight, or a sibling that says that I want to watch my shows while I'm on train commute. So they're kind of a bit structured.
So that's, I think you're very, very close to that, and that's also something that I've done here. Basically, as you've said, that the location is kind of a common factor, and then you've also said that, hey, they're kind of related. So you can see that these two, they're already siblings here, right? And an example of how to structure them would be this one, yeah? I mean, now you can call the parent in different ways, but you can cluster them as two siblings, and then you can say, well, I want to watch my shows on the go, and then you can do it either on the plane or on a train commute, because here there are different conditions that you have to take into account if you want to pursue this specific customer need. Okay, now let's go next. Next is the exercise that you've already done, and we are in the second step where me as a user, I'm not sure what to watch. And you already structured one branch under I can't find anything to watch. And you have 4 more here. Is this show any good? I don't know when a new season is available. What type of show is this? Or I want to know what my friends are watching. Can you see any opportunities to cluster them together? Again, here also some of them, they might just be by themselves for now. It's also fine. But is there something, or do you see any siblings or any parent that you would want to cluster them together?
I think this one, is this show any good, and what type of show is this? They are siblings. And it's the same question. And the others are 2 different points.
I don't know when a new season is available is a child of I'm out of episode of my favorite show.
I see the 3 ones on the right classified in the characteristic of the show. For example, you click on a show and it shows like the rating of out of 5 stars. For example, it's 4.7. It's also written when the next season will be available and on what type of show it is. For example, a drama or a thriller, and it's all classified in the characteristic of show. And maybe the 4th one will be if our friends watched the show, it will be like these people also watched this show, also in the characteristic of the Netflix. So I guess on the main branch is according to characteristic of the film.
I think all the ideas that I've heard here, they are very valid, but what I really liked and I wanted to mention is that I've heard different opinions from different people, and that is exactly the kind of exercise you'll have to go through, because this is when you map your customer needs, you don't do it alone. You always have to do it with someone to bounce ideas back and forth, and then to see, well, is this actually the parent? No, this is actually the child, and these 2 are siblings, and so on and so forth. And then you start a very good discussion around what is really the customer need and how do you cluster them. Now, the way I would suggest to also cluster them here, I did it this way, right? So, for instance, Adrian, you said, is the show any good is similar to, I think, what type of show is this? For me, the way I saw it is that, is the show any good is kind of like the parent, and then I have a need of what type of show is this, which is a part of, is the show any good? And also, I want to know what my friends are watching, because I don't know if this show is good, so I want to know what my friends are watching. So for me, this is a subset of the parent one. And I think actually it's a good idea to put when I don't know when a new season is available under the I'm out of episodes. For me, I just also left it out there alone. But this is a really real good life example to show you how this kind of exercise, it's really something that you need to do with the teams to bounce ideas back and forth and to see how you build this. Now, this is an example of, let's say, how would you go through the stages of a product that you want to build and how you would prioritize your customer needs. The next natural step is prioritization. Now, there are a couple of factors that you can take into account when you look at all the needs, because at the point in time, you're going to have to think, which need from this map do I pursue? And one factor is the opportunity sizing. And here there are two main questions to answer. How many customers are affected by this need? And how often? And you're going to have to be very careful here, because there are needs where you have all the customers that are affected, but very rarely. On the contrary, you will have needs where you have only a couple of customers that are affected, but those might be big customers that bring you the majority of your revenue. So there are just a couple of customers, but they are affected all the time by this need. So that's the kind of exercise you'll also have to do when you think of, how do I size this opportunity? Is this one bigger or smaller than this one if I look at the opportunity size? The other one is market factors, right? So the idea, if it's a table stake or a differentiator, I think it's very well known to all of you, right? You need to think if this need is a must-have, it's something that's out there in the market and I just need to pursue this need, or if it's a differentiator, or if I follow this need, this is going to open for me a new market segment, and so on and so forth. The same for the company factor. And here I'm going to go back to what I said before. When you follow a customer need, you don't just blindly follow it because this is a need. There is always the business constraint. There is always a constraint from the business. That means, what is my vision, but also what are my strategic objectives? Do I target enterprise clients? Do I target smaller clients? All these strategic objectives, there are also constraints that you have to take into account when you are prioritizing your customer needs. Now, you've got your opportunity solution tree, and you have the factors that you should consider when you look at the opportunities and which one you should pursue. One important factor to take into account is that you shouldn't spend a lot of time, weeks and months, to gather the exact correct data in order to say, you know, for this opportunity I gather this number and this number. Because if we go back to the problem space, it's what it's called an ill-structured problem, because the opportunity space, so the customer needs, they're infinite. It's not like what we've done right now, you've seen already, there is a lot of subjectivity. It's not like A plus B equals C. Therefore, when you go into prioritizing those needs, it's not about spending tons of time to gather the right data. It's more like, I'm spending time right now to gather some context, to understand and to be confident that, hey, this is the opportunity that I want to pursue. I might have some doubts, but this is what I want to go about. And then I go and ideate, I brainstorm, and then I test, and so on and so forth. The idea here is very similar to the lean startup, right? I really want to pursue this opportunity. I move fast and I test it, because down the road, I can figure out that maybe that's not the right opportunity to pursue, and then I go back and again and again. And an example of what I did when I was at PlanA is that I started to work with the teams back in the days on these two opportunities. And when I came, it was very clear that I want to add data quickly, and I'm going back to PlanA, was a very big pain point for our customers. What the teams have told me when I joined, they were like, oh, Irina, the manual data collection, you know, when you enter a number in a cell, super bad usability, you got to fix it. And then we started talking to clients. And then we identified another needs where the clients I've talked to, they were like, well, I can't upload files. So I have files with data. Your system is giving me errors. I don't know what's happening. And we started to discuss with the teams, which one do we do? What we took into account here is also the opportunity sizing, how many customers are affected and how often. But the main factor that played into following that opportunity is that in time when we talked to the management team, they wanted to pivot from our target audience who were small and medium companies to enterprise clients. What does that mean? Enterprise clients, they're not going to spend time to enter manually in a box a number. Enterprise clients, they have files or they have API integrations and so on and so forth. And that was for me a very clear sign than to argue to the team. And I said, hey guys, it makes much more sense to focus on that one because down the road we're going to get many more enterprise clients who will have this pain point. Similar here, we did the same thing. There was a big discussion under clients. They were telling a lot to our customer success team, I don't understand how our emissions calculated. Now, customer success team was getting very annoyed. It's like every single client is asking me, how is this emission calculated? Why don't we do something in the product? Fair enough. But then we also had, how do I know which calculation is most accurate? And if you recall at the beginning of the session, I was telling you that we offer different calculation methods. You can, in the example of transportation, you can calculate your emissions by looking at the distance, by looking at the fuel consumption. And customers, they would say, well, I see 5 calculations, how do I know which one I pick? The more we started to gather our data from sales and from interviews, we realized that I don't know which calculation is most accurate, is actually affecting all the clients, is affecting them all the time, and even more, there was a solution for that in all our competitors. And we say, okay, first, we're gonna focus on this one, and that's what we did. Now, this is what I wanted to show you today. To look at a problem space, to know how to organize it, following the framework of Teresa Torres, by structuring it as a tree, and then trying to prioritize them. However, there are many, many good prioritization methods out there. I just listed here a couple of them. They're all valid, they're useful, and I also encourage you to go ahead and explore them and see if you can use them in your work. However, if there is one key takeaway that I would like you to take with you from today, it's schedule time in your calendars to get to know your customers, and don't do it when you're in a rush. Schedule it and make it a habit every single time. That's the only way to build products that will delight your customers. And if you want to work on your discovery products, the session today, I built it because back in the days I also came across this book which also helped a lot my product management work. And if you want to go ahead and read more about this, in her book, Teresa explains basically the example that I explained to you today, but then she explains many, many more examples. And I very warmly recommend you to buy it and look into that if you are a product manager or a founder or just someone who really wants to understand how do I properly do customer discovery. Thank you very much. There are... Thank you. I've seen some questions at the back. Okay.
Hi there, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's really not a question, it's a favor to ask. Can you please go back 2 slides? I didn't have a chance to make a photo of that.
This one?
No, before. Yeah, this one, thank you.
Okay, well that was an easy one.
Thank
but
you.
don't worry, I think, I don't know, I mean you can
Thank
get
you, I'm
access
done.
to the slides too, but yeah.
Are there any questions? All right.
Thanks as well for the nice presentation and the interactive activity. You do bring energy for sure, that's your superpower, I agree.
Thank you.
My question was, how many times or how often do you actually end up having those interviews? I know it takes time setting them up, getting access to, I guess, I don't know, top CEOs of the clients, companies that you have.
Yep.
And then I have a follow-up question, but yeah, I'll stop here.
This is an amazing question, and I have to say that I also struggle a lot with that because when I joined the company right now, which I love, I had to do like almost like a promotion within the company to be like, guys, give me access to clients. They're like, Irina, but we're telling them what they're telling. And I was like, no, I want to talk to them. I want to understand them. The ideal frequency is once a week. If you can't do once a week, do it once every 2 weeks, right? But the idea is that it should be recurrent. If you can't do now once every 2 weeks, start once every 3 weeks. I started with once every 3 weeks, and I think every 3 weeks and then 3.5, and then I started to do it more often and often. I have to say that the harsh reality is that if you are in a company also, you really have to pitch them the idea, because they're going to tell you, but well, that was my discussion with my customer success team who have access to the clients, and they're telling me, well, but I'm going to tell you what they say. And I'm like, no, you're not asking the right questions. I need to be there, and I need to understand them. And also, I need to build that empathy, because then I'm going to talk to the team to build that product. Another solution also, I'm not sure if you're a B2C or a B2B business.
Mostly B2B.
Mostly B2B. Another idea that they give is, for instance, on your tool, right, to have like a pop-up and say, hey, do you want to talk to us? The disadvantage here is that these are not targeted clients. If you talk through a customer success team, they will kind of select the clients for you so that you know how to address specific questions. And here you don't know, but the benefit is that if they go through that pop-up and so on and so forth, you know, when you talk to one customer, it means nothing. But at the point in time when you start talking to 100 customers, then you gather a lot of intelligence.
Yeah, and my follow-up, I know you didn't have the time probably to touch on that. I, for example, did the transcribing, I did coding of a bunch of text, which takes forever unless you use some tools. And I was curious whether you use tools, specific ones, and then how do you actually prioritize? I've seen a lot of very, very nice frameworks. We end up doing more value versus complexity or effort. I was curious whether it's the same reality for you. Do you actually have the time to go through the data and then prioritize with any tools or frameworks that you showed? Yeah.
Let me ask you a question first. When you do the framework that you're using, are you prioritizing features or customer needs first?
Customer needs, yeah.
Customer needs.
Basically pain points, mostly. Yeah.
Pain points.
Yeah.
Okay. So for us, what we do is that so in the book, actually, and I shared this framework with the guys this week, a couple of startups at XY. Teresa Torres suggests in the book a very nice framework to gather customer data. I very warmly recommend you. If not, you can come also afterwards and I can show it to you. And you can do it, we do it on Miro, for instance. We also use Confluence. But essentially, it's a way to summarize the data. And she says, okay, even put the photo of the customer because you create more empathy. Think of a memorable quote and then start to kind of map the customer needs and even map a bit the journey and the pain points they go through. But the idea is that we are synthesizing this question. So we're always gathering together with the engineering manager, with the designer, and then we say, okay, maybe right now we do it at the end of the month. We have a couple of interviews, and then we do them together, and then we review them. But we have already an opportunity solution tree in place. So it's huge, and it's already built, and we're just adding as we go. But at the beginning, I do have to say it's a lot of work, because we started to do it with Miro and in Confluence, and then me and the designer were going through that all the time. And the beauty of it is that in the end, we not only use customer interviews, but then we also use the data that we get from sales and so on and so forth. We are also using another tool which is called, how is it called? Product something. Product board, exactly, where we gather basically all the customer needs, and then we structure them and we put them on a roadmap. For me, the lessons I've learned is not that much about the tools, but it's about the processes, and that was the most difficult thing to bring forward with the team and the company.
Thank you. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Add up some spice to the questions part. So before asking a question, please present yourself, so your name and a bit about of your company or your product, so that Irina has some context.
A good one. Thank you, Trajan.
Vlad. I'm Vlad.
Pune Vlad.
Okay. So in my context, the clients are remote. I only have their email. any strategies to get them to answer? Because most of the time, I try to get in touch, unless it's someone from China and I don't speak Chinese or something. But the response rate I've got so far was not impressive, to say the least.
So to understand rightly, you already tried to contact them via email and be like, hey, would you like to talk to me? Mainly to people in China or around the world, just to get
around
a bit of context? Around the world. And they never got back to you?
Some do, but I was wondering if maybe you have resources on approaches, maybe. I mean, the way that I try to approach this is just to start a discussion, a conversation. You know, I've seen you registered, you did this and that. How was it for you? Did you have any issues or things like that? Not too formal, not too hard. So that's one approach that I employed. Do you have maybe some lists of resources of?
Yeah. So what we do when we start approaching our customers is that we really have a pitch and we really try to tell them, hey, you know, let's co-create, let's work together. Your input is really valuable for us, and if you're gonna talk to me, it's gonna help us improve the product. And this is usually very helpful because you emphasize how they can help you, and people usually like to help. This is number one. Number two, in general. Yeah,
so you
that wasn't clear.
Asking for help, basically, in a way.
Yeah, we phrased it in a way where we're saying, hey, I'm very grateful that you're here, that you're using my product. Would you be open to have a conversation? We would appreciate, because together, we're working together, you are helping us building the product. And then you're in a situation where you put them in a situation where they help, and usually that works because people feel needed, and that's one of the main kind of motivational needs that we as human beings have. So that works. Number two, what I wanted to say is that in general, don't give up. You know, it's like in marketing, you know, we target a huge audience and then you get only a percentage of that. So try to reach more and more to your customers, and you're always going to have a smaller percentage. And number three, what really works very well is an incentive. It can be monetary. You know, let's talk. But you have to be very clear that you have to know that this is an important customer and his feedback is going to be very important. You can also use incentives. You know, we're going to give you a discount this month on this and that. Instead, if you want to talk to us, and so on and so forth. That also usually works very well.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hello, I'm Dennis. I'm part of the Core Lab Tech team. We're focusing on digitalized healthcare systems. So my question is, how would we deal with a large number of customers? Let's say we have a big batch of customers. Should we approach the interviews in a bunch of numbers of them, or should we take it one by one? And what are the advantages of the first part and the second part?
Never in a bunch. This is the story of the focus groups, and there is a very good example that exemplifies why you should never do a focus group. It was a big thing back in the days, but it backfired. And the example that they usually give is the Sony, how is that called? Când pui caseta acolo, I forgot the name. The Sony Walkman. I wanted to say the Sony Magnetophone, but it's the Sony Walkman. And they did an exercise, and they brought customers in a focus group, and they wanted to see if they would basically, the customers would like the yellow version of the Walkman, because it was usually black. And in the focus group, everyone, they asked them, oh, would you like to, would you go for a yellow Walkman? And they all said yes. And they were like, okay, fine. And then they just also told them, by the way, when you go out, here there is a table, and there are lots of Walkmans. You can pick one. All of them, they picked the black one. That is to say that in the focus group, they were saying, I would like to go for the yellow one, but they picked the black one. So never focus groups, because people, they bias themselves, the others basically. Always do it individually. And in general, there are two types of interviews. So there is an evaluative type of interview and there is a generative type of interview. What I talked about today was mostly a generative type of interviews where you just go and you explore a lot in general your customer needs, right? And there are certain frameworks that or questions that you should ask customers when you just go to talk to them and you want to understand what are their pain points in general about the product. And then you have interviews that are very targeted, where you know that you want to maybe test a specific flow and so on and so forth, but always go one by one. I would go back to what I said, it's very important to make sure that you have this cadence, continuous and habitual cadence when you talk to them all the time. And in general, the type of interview will differ depending on your needs, because sometimes you want to have, you need to test the flow now. Of course, you're going to go for a very specific question where you're going to test the flow. Sometimes you want to make sure that you are just always in touch with your customers' needs and you're going to go with very general questions. Now, if you want afterwards, I can also talk a little bit more about how do you approach a generative interview, because there are specific questions that you should ask and there are many caveats also there, and how do you approach a specific interview also. So we can explore on this topic.
Good evening, my name is Sergio. I have a question towards the OST tree.
Yes.
So in all of the examples that you have shown, there are multiple children to one parent. Is there a European type of family where one child can have two parents? And can there be only one child to one parent, or in such cases, we put it separately? Yes.
There's no such thing of European family.
Yeah, no, I mean, can one child be related to two parents in the OST tree?
No.
No.
Doesn't make sense. Then
Okay.
it's so this is a bit of a logical relationships, but ideally one child is a subset of a bigger opportunity. And if one child can have two parents, what you're telling me then is that the two parents, there is something, you didn't phrase them correctly, so they are mostly similar, right? It's the same with, like, sometimes if you figure out that you have a parent and only a child, it also doesn't make sense, because I'm like, well, a parent should have also two children, right? Because in the end, if it's just going vertically, that's not the point. You need to make sure that you break it down. You know what I mean? And then you have siblings who, they in the end explain the bigger parent out there, and they are subsets. Another thing that can help you also differentiate between the two opportunities, how can you make them more and more distinct? It's the exercise that we made at the very beginning where we said, let's look at the user journey. Because when you think about distinct moments in time, that's a very easy way to already differentiate opportunities. Because something that is coming at the same point in time, the probability is that those are going to be subsets and children of the bigger parent. And one way to think about differentiating them is that this need is coming at a different point in time in the journey, and so that means that that's a different need. Yeah.
Let me give you one question. My name is Trajan. I'm founder of XY Partners, so I have a question. It just crossed my mind, and I'm curious about your point of view on it. Some days ago, I was mentoring a team who was part of one of our programs, and they come up with this interesting situation. So the team is doing some software, and they have two types of clients. One type of client doesn't ask for any new features, is not very responsive to feedback, but pays a lot of money for the service. I mean, weird type of client, but they're like gross guys. I mean, they're giving good money to the product. Unresponsive at all. When asked like, what's your problem? Like, what's your pain? No, nothing. Everything is okay. So that's number one. Second type of client is very frequent user. I mean, those guys are using it every week or every month, but are paying fairly less at magnitude 10x less than the first type of client. And this one is actually always craving for some new features and some new tools or some new improvements into the system and so on and so forth. And the guys came to me and asked me, okay, like, who should we focus on? Should we focus on these big whales who are not giving us anything than money for whatever we've built so far? Or where do we want to build up upon of this new type of users who are actually asking us for new features every day?
I think that's a beautiful question that is gonna take me back to show why it's so important to actually do that kind of exercise, right? Because the fact that a customer is coming and is telling you, I don't know, I want this feature and this feature and this feature. First of all, people, they talk about what they want, but they actually don't know what they want. That's a different topic. But I would suggest if you are in a situation like that, that is telling me that I need to go back and build that kind of framework on that kind of tree, because this is based on a lot of insights from other customers too, right? This is number one, because here I hear that I have the issue between one big client and then a smaller one who wants just this and that. It helps a lot to talk to other clients and to put this into perspective. For instance, is the need that the smaller client mentioning so many times, is it also something that's mentioned by other clients or not? And that's going to help you a lot to put things into perspective. This is number one. Number two, very important when we talk to them, especially the big one, because I can understand from a business perspective, this guy is bringing me a lot of money, I want to understand why, like I want to understand their pains. And then I would suggest the approach, very typical also in customer discovery. You don't ask them about what is your pain point, but you go with, tell me about the last time when you used my product. This is an extremely powerful question because it uncovers the behavior that they do while they use the product, and without them knowing, they will tell you what are their pains. It takes a bit of preparation for this kind of interview, but you don't ask them directly what are your pains, and you just tell me, well, tell me about the last time when you used the product. How did it start? How did you come up with the idea? Set the scene. Who were you with? What did you do next? And next, did you have something? Or were there any challenges? And without realizing, they will tell you more and more and more things. But in the end, those are the needs that you kind of try to write them down. And for me, looking just at the needs of two customers is just not enough, right? You have to go and discover more and more and more so that in the end you get this kind of overview. That would be my
Thank you.
I guess.
Who's next?
Hi, my name is Andrian. I would like to ask you about the situation. Let's imagine that we already had a discussion with our clients. We define a list of needs that we want to solve. Some of them are complex, some of them are easy. All of them or many of them are a priority for us, but we have a problem with resources. We don't have too much time for that, and too many people, or maybe the costs are also a problem. And we are in the position to decide which of them to do, in what order, what to do in parallel, what would be the next thing to do, and so on. If you can give us an advice how we should choose when we have these constraints. Thank you.
So first of all, when it's a really good question too. First of all, when I caught you saying we have a lot of priorities. So usually when you say I have a lot of priority, that means that you don't know what's your priorities, because there is no such thing as we have a lot of priorities. And I'm also facing that too, because then sometimes it's like, what is your priority? Well, let me give you a list of 10, no? Doesn't help. And it's really important. Yeah, you wanted to say something.
I want to say that we have some of them, okay, not a lot of.
Yeah.
We have some priorities.
Yeah.
And all of them can be done in 6 months, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or not all of them. Many of them can be done in 6 months. And
yeah.
we have only 6 months, let's say 10 people, and we need to choose.
Yeah, yeah. So number one, when you talked about priorities, you have to be really, really, especially when you're talking about a startup, really, really, really ruthless when it comes to priority, right? And especially when someone comes and you're asking them, tell me your priorities, and then say, now, 1, this, 2, da, 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 da. always ask them to stack rank them. You're going to see it's going to be a problem for them to pick what's number one, what's number two, because they're going to tell you all of them are important. That's just as a parenthesis. How would you go about prioritization? It goes back to customer needs. Make sure that when you have, let's say you have your list of things that you want to build, it's very easy to think, okay, I'm just going to do this one because it's easy, this one is more complicated because this and that, and you're falling into the trap of like, feature, what's the feature that I want to build? Try to take a step back and think, what is my customer need? Because it can be that when you start prioritizing your needs, and you try to go through this exercise of really understanding, what is the journey that my customers are going through and what are the main needs that they are facing, and then you kind of try to make this framework, and then you start prioritizing your customer needs. And you start working on the ones that you've prioritized. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, well, this feature is just something that I can easily do, and I'm not going to do this one because it's much more complicated, it's taking me 6 months. It can be that because you decided to go on the more complex user need and by default feature, it's going to help you now for 6 months down the road to be ahead of the competition versus you would have chosen the easier feature. So that is one way to look at this. So you really think of what is the most painful need of my customers, not features, not that I need to implement, I don't know, this flow and this feature and so on and so forth, but what is the need? The other thing is that also you have to make a difference between strategically the most important pain points, because when we talked about this today, we're also talking a lot about product strategy, right? Because you're really looking at the whole user journey and you're trying to identify the main needs to focus on first, because these are the ones that you've decided that are important right now. The reality is that you have many other small, even feature requests that you have to implement. That's also something that's happening, and that's something that you also can then combine, right? And usually those are increments. This is what's called continuous improvement. Now, if a customer is going to ask me, or I see in my usability tests that they say, well, I don't know, this button shouldn't be here and so on and so forth, I'm not going to go through this whole exercise and be like, but what's your need with the button? Well, it's just a button, you need to improve the flow, it's real life, the product needs to be improved. So those are features that are there, and that's part of what we call continuous improvement. But never underestimate the exercise of like really looking into your customer needs, and if it's an important one, and let's say you know it's gonna take your resources, break it down, do MVP, and then start building upon that. But really have to keep in mind that if you've done your exercises correctly, you have to pick up all the time the main features you're working on. They are a result of the exercise that you've done where you really understood that this is a real pain point of my customer, and if I'm building it now, or if I'm addressing it now, that's gonna make my customer happy, that's gonna take my business ahead. But it's a combination of both. And if it's too complex, if you find that the solution is too complex, you break it down into smaller things and then you build it in increments.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bogdan. So my question is more as an entrepreneur. So we have a company, and the company right now is developing a new product. Our problem is how to find exactly who is our audience, even though we want to target like all the people, like does not matter the ages and stuff. So how do we know exactly in Moldova? Because I'm not speaking about worldwide, I'm speaking about Moldova. The mentality is completely differently. So the same product can be a really good one in Europe, but maybe it's not the right time in Moldova. So that's my question. How exactly can we find our target audience, and exactly how can we develop the survey for them and to understand if is this product worth it or not? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a case of product market fit for me, right? Where one of the questions that you try to answer is that, is there a need for my product right now, right? And the question is simple in the sense that you gotta go and talk to your customers. And What you do at the beginning is, of course, a lot of customer interviews and discoveries, and then afterwards you kind of start building a prototype, and then you start testing and so on and so forth, the whole typical lean startup situation, right? Now, when it comes to interviews, I think I've seen a similar theme here. A lot of you that have asked the same question here, and we can also talk a bit more about afterwards. But there are two types, evaluative and generative. You would go with a generative interview, where generative, that means that you explore the whole need in the market, so you don't have to focus on something specific. And there are a specific way to address, like I mentioned, I don't know, before, I think, the main question to ask is, tell me about the last time when you did this. So in your case where you don't know yet if your product is going to, or you don't know who is your target audience and if the customers would like it or not, first try to think, how are customers currently feeling this need? Your product is not there yet, but there is a journey they go through to accomplish the need for which you want to bring your product. And try to think, as we did here, try to map the steps that your potential client, you would think, would go through. Having that in mind, you would go and talk to them and always ask the questions, tell me about the last time when you did this activity for which you're building the product. And they will start telling you what they're going through. And then you start doing what we call excavating a story. And the idea is never to ask them, tell me what's your pain point when you're doing this and that. The idea is to really incite them to tell you a story. Because what happens when people, they go through a story, you really understand the points they go through one by one, and then you can stop them and tell me more a bit that point in time. Were you alone? Was there someone with you? Because that can also count. Was this a challenge for you? Was it difficult or not? And what did you do next? And then next, and next, and so on and so forth. And then in the end, try to talk to at least 20 to 30 customers to see what they say. At the point in time, you'll identify certain pain points and needs, and based on that, you try to build a first MVP and so on and so forth, and then you go into testing. But always go with this kind of questions first.
Okay, but I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
As you know, I'm a freshman in this area, so basically, what I want to know, for example, if I develop a product for a company, I know exactly where to go. Where in our case, this is a conference where all the companies are together, like here, you know, we're staying with entrepreneurs and stuff. So basically, I can speak with these guys and ask like, what is your pain, you know, and they can tell me. But in our case, if the let's say the primary user is a simple guy like me and all the people. Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, thank you. It will be a pleasure, like afterwards. So, yeah. So, is there like any advice, like how do we need to find those people, or do we need to stalk those people? I don't know, like how exactly we can find, you know, the quantity of users that we can potentially ask them. Like.
So the question is, how do I find those people?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Sergio had a very good advice there. I mean, it's literally being super creative. What is really important here, I would say, is that probably your product targets a specific type of clients. I don't know, I can imagine, maybe it's artists, maybe it's sportsmen, and so on and so forth. If it's everyone, then it's super easy. Just get all the contacts here, go and talk to them. If it's everyone and you still need to narrow it down, well, go and, I don't know, stop someone on the street. It can work. If people, they're open and to that, you can literally go and talk to them and be like, hey, do you have 15 minutes for me? Do you have 20 minutes for me? You can also address them on LinkedIn, every kind of conferences, every kind of friend circle. Always tell them, hey, do you have 20 minutes? What is the most important, though, I would say, is really how do you prepare for that interview? Because you need to prepare for that in order to get the insights that you need then afterwards for your product. Pleasure. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Alex, and I'm an alcoholic. No. So I'll set some context. I'm a co-founder in a startup that's basically a marketplace, and like any marketplace, there are two customers here. There are the providers and the client. So when we onboard the providers, we kind of tell them like, we really, really want your feedback on this product. So please write us an email what you think. And no one writes. So the questions here is, should we spam them with emails, hey, what's up, what you're doing, or should we approach them somehow? And what will be that?
So you're talking about your providers?
Yeah.
Yeah. First thing, it's funny because I talked about marketplaces also this week a lot about it to other people, but marketplaces are very special cases in the sense that you have basically two flows, because you have the providers who are also your customers, and then you have the end users, right? And you're going to have to do double the work because they have different needs. You just have to match them together. That's number one. And when I'm talking about interviewing customers, especially for this kind of thing, when you really want to understand their needs, ideally, it's never a WhatsApp, it's never an email, it's never, here are the questions, answer. It's always a personal contact. It really, really matters. And it's always, hey, do you have some time for me to talk to you about a certain thing? And you can decide if you want to identify a certain flow that you want to check with them, or if you want to go with a general approach. Hey, tell me about the last time when you used our platform, what happened? But similarly, come prepared, understand a bit their user journey, their points, so that you can excavate the story with them. But always in person. If you can't, if they are not physically in the same location, what we do a lot is that we do it over Zoom, but we never do it over emails or WhatsApp. That's more like survey type, tell me about your satisfaction and so on and so forth. But if you want to uncover it, then better to be in person.
So you set up a Zoom call specifically for this, only to ask them, hey, what's up, what you're doing, can you give us some? This is the subject of the meeting, or you establish something else, and then after that,
yeah.
This one.
So the subject of the meeting would be, I think that's similar to the question that I got previously about how do you incentivize them, and a very good way to do that based on the human psychology is always to tell them, hey, we're very happy that you are our client, we value a lot our relationship. We are really working hard to improve it, and we would appreciate a lot of feedback because it would help us a lot to improve our product. And in this case, you really put them in a situation where they want to help, and everyone wants to help, and usually it works.
Irina, thank you very much for the speech. Let's give her a round of applause.